More young men from Minnesota have attempted to travel overseas to fight for terror groups than from any other state in the nation. 5 of those men will go on trial this spring.
Now, the case against them will rely heavily on confidential informants, but there is one informant the jury will probably not hear from. Tom Lydon of the Fox 9 Investigators is here with the story behind the story.
And I think it is. It really is the story behind the story. The use of confidential informants in terror cases, very common, but it is not without some controversy along the way. Post 9/11, the FBI is reportedly using some 15,000 confidential informants nationwide, many of them young Muslim men. Tonight, the story of one of them who made a decision a few months ago to talk to us, a choice that he believes came with serious consequences. A few times a day, Tony Osman turns on classical music, sits down in his kitchen, and gets high. And he claims gets better.
For me, it mainly relieves the nausea problem that I have, because after every meal, I'll vomit.
He has an autoimmune condition and smokes medical cannabis in liquid form through a vaporizer. It costs him $90 a day.
How stoned do you get?
Well, this stuff is actually a lot weaker than the stuff that I was making myself.
Stuff you were making yourself
Yeah,
was better.
so the stuff I was making myself was better. It was more potent, and it was a higher quality. This is the first room, which was just a vegetating room.
Until recently, Tony was growing his own marijuana, illegally, in his basement, turning the marijuana he grew into smokable hash oil.
This looks pretty sophisticated.
It is, yeah, it's sophisticated.
I mean, how many plants did you have going here?
Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8,
By
9,
his
10,
count,
11,
he had at least 72 plants. That is until 3 months ago, when his Golden Valley home was raided by the Northwest Metro Drug Task Force.
They were treating me like they were on the Bin Laden raid, or they had just gotten El Chapo. Right here is where I see a siren.
Police and the bomb squad pulling Tony over while driving near Worth Park.
First thing I saw was a uniformed officer who grabbed both my hands and said, "Don't move. Where are the explosives? Where are the explosives? Where are the explosives?"
There's a reason police were cautious. As Tony will tell you, terrorism runs in his family. But Tony believes the raid was really retaliation, because for about a year, he'd been a paid informant for the FBI.
Do you believe the FBI knew you had a grow operation?
Yes.
Did you tell them you had a grow operation?
Yes. They told me, well, all we care about is extremism.
Tony says he first approached the FBI nearly 2 years ago with a detailed conspiracy theory involving the murder of his father in a staged car accident 30 years ago in New Jersey. But the FBI wasn't interested. So Tony went back last June to show the FBI elaborate timelines and charts showing how Tony was an accidental tourist in the world of global terrorism. When Tony was only 9 years old and other kids were going to summer camp, his stepfather took him to terror training camps in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where he says he crossed paths with such notorious figures as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, now in Guantanamo; Ali Mohammed, who wrote al-Qaeda's terror training manual; Ramzi Youssef, convicted in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Tony's stepfather, Khalid Ibrahim, is an unindicted co-conspirator in that case, and became an immigration sponsor for another key figure, a radical cleric named the Blind Sheikh, Omar Abdulrahman, who spent a couple months living with Tony's family at their home in New Jersey.
I heard him with my own ears in our living room issue a fatwa that it's okay to blow up the World Trade Center building, but it's not okay to blow up the UN building.
Tony admits the FBI laughed him out of the office.
Really? Come on now. The Blind Sheikh?
But 2 days later, after checking his family tree, they invited him back.
And then they picked up a picture. Do you know this individual? I was like, yeah, it's Amir Meshal.
Amir Meshal is a cousin on both Tony's mother and father's side. The two have known each other since they were children. The FBI captured Meshal 8 years ago, leaving an al-Qaeda training camp in Somalia. Meshal was held for 3 months in secret prisons overseas before he was released back in the U.S. Now living in Minnesota, Meshal is on the no-fly list because, according to Homeland Security, he represents a threat of conducting a violent act of terrorism and is operationally capable of doing so. And yet, as the Fox 9 investigators uncovered, Meshal was able to get his Class A commercial driver's license, allowing Meshal to drive semi-trucks and school buses.
Yeah, they're super interested now. Now they're like...
Tony says the FBI paid him $2,000 a month for an entire year in cash. His code name, Griffin.
The assignments first started like, get us this phone number, get us that phone number. Go make contact with this person. Go pray in this mosque. Go pray in that mosque.
Meshal introduced Tony to many of the young Minnesota men now indicted on terror charges. Tony, who's a personal trainer, even helped them get in shape. But they would not listen to Western music.
They would play ISIS songs for the workout music.
His FBI handlers gave Tony a wire to record dozens of conversations. Tony even took this surveillance photo at a local mosque, showing 3 of the young men now indicted on terror charges allegedly watching jihadist videos on an iPhone with Meshal, who is hidden from view. Zakaria Abdurrahman and Anad Musay have pled guilty to terror charges. Guled Omar in the middle goes on trial this spring with 4 others. But as Tony was spying on the suspects, he was also recording his conversations with the FBI, recordings we've listened to in order to confirm Tony's story.
I just followed up with you. I got the addresses.
The FBI won't confirm or deny that Tony Osman was a paid informant. That's no surprise. It's standard operating procedure for the Bureau. For his part, though, Tony says he grew disillusioned with his undercover work when he kept seeing the young recruits indicted, the pawns in the game as he saw it, instead of the puppet masters, the ones really pulling the strings.
Like, you know, there's a high-level person and a low-level person, and they were focused on low-level people because they want as many convictions as possible, while leaving the high-level radicalizer free to radicalize as many young people so they can get as many convictions as possible.
So in desperation, Tony talked to the Fox 9 investigators, telling us how his cousin Amir Meshal was obsessed with jihad.
Did he say whether he would ever do jihad in the United States?
He didn't specifically say, I'm going to do jihad in the United States, but he told me that it's his right to do jihad wherever he is. And if the enemies of Islam trap him in Dar al-Harb, in the enemy land, that all options are open to him.
Meshal's attorney with the ACLU calls the allegations rehashed, false, stigmatizing, and says if it is true that Mr. Osman was a paid FBI informant, as he now claims, that only indicates he had a monetary motive for his behavior.
In the car ride, Amir was listening to The Blind Sheikh.
After Tony's interview with the Fox 9 investigators, he says the FBI cut him loose. And that's when he started his grow operation. He suspects the drug raid on his home 5 months later may have been payback.
They got the green light from the FBI to destroy this whole house and me.
According to police reports obtained by the Fox 9 investigators, it was a carpet cleaner who had been in Tony's home to clean up a water leak who tipped off police to Tony's grow operation. But those police reports also reveal the drug task force was well aware of the Fox 9 story. Were concerned Tony's cousin and stepfather were terror suspects, and by the photograph of Tony as a 9-year-old with the RPG launcher. The drug task force even contacted the FBI, who confirmed the information Osman provided about himself appeared to be accurate. Tony says the FBI handlers showed up at the Golden Valley Police Department.
Can you please vouch for me, man? And then he says, you know what, when he was working with us, he was very honest and trustworthy.
And now it was the task force that had an offer. Become an undercover drug informant.
I told him I don't know any kingpins. All I know is terrorism suspects, and I've already handed them all in.
Tony refused to become an informant again, claiming all those plants were for his personal use. He's now facing felony drug charges. He's also broke. Next month, his home will be auctioned. In hindsight, it's easy to see the FBI's dilemma with Tony. His family connections made him an intelligence asset, someone who could perhaps get them one step closer to the terror pipeline. But an informant who gets high several times a day and who talks to the media is no longer reliable or confidential. Tony was useful, until he became a liability.
The FBI is no longer laughing at Tony, but they're not taking his phone calls either. There are details about how Tony operated that we've left out so as not to jeopardize any ongoing investigation. At least 3 other informants have been identified in court documents. Defense attorneys are expected to bring up various issues relating to their possible motives for cooperating with law enforcement. It appears that some of them may have struck deals to avoid prosecution, and that is why they became informants.
What do you make of Tony's point that they're just going after the recruits and not the masterminds?
I think it's interesting, but that's also how some of these cases are built from the ground up. You get the lower level people to go after the kingpins. So it's possible that that's what prosecutors are doing in this case.
And what about these 70-some marijuana plants? It seems like a lot for personal.
And we've checked with some people who would know. One of the things that Tony says is that he had to kind of grind those down to get the hash oil. You need a lot of plants to create that hash oil. And those 72 plants actually were at different stages of development. Not all of them were full grown yet.
Okay. And does he worry about his safety at all?
He does.
Now that he's put himself out there?
I've mentioned to him, I think he's taking a tremendous risk, but it's one he wants to take, quite frankly.
Fascinating.
Yeah, very. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tom.
Sure.